Hello and welcome to the Association for Coaching podcast. My name is Rob Lawrence and I'm your host for this Boost Your Coaching Business series. My guest today is somebody who came to coaching at a young age and early on in her career. She specialises in working with people under the age of 30 in organisations and has built her own business, Quarter Life, with the aim of helping those in their 20s create more fulfilling lives and careers through her unique approach to coaching. As somebody who has a reputation for challenging and sometimes breaking the rules of traditional approaches in both coaching and business, and as somebody who believes in taking a creative approach to both life and business challenges, she is somebody who believes that the opportunity to coach has infinite possibilities. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today, Chloë Garland. Chloë, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on the podcast, Chloë. So for our listener, and thanks for joining us today, how would you describe yourself and what it is you do in the world?
So I think, first and foremost, I always describe myself as a coach. Having fallen in love with coaching a number of years ago, it's always the first thing that I say. And what I do in the world and how that shows up in the world is that my kind of mantra is, what I try to achieve is helping under 30s have more fulfilling careers. And I work with both individuals and with companies. With individuals, I help them navigate what's called the quarter life crisis, hence the name of my business, Quarter Life, and help them try and get some clarity over the direction of their career. And then I more recently have started to work with companies to help them create more of coaching cultures for their under 30s and to help them just create a better place to work for young people and to bridge the gap between the older generations and the younger generations in the workplace.
You've got a fascinating backstory and I'd love to get into that in a moment. But first, tell me more about the quarter life crisis. What is that?
Yeah, so the quarter life crisis is something that's it's quite often sneered at in a way and something that's not being particularly taken very seriously. And one of those is often people describe as another one of those millennial things that we complain about. But it's actually something that has been increasingly studied in the last few years as a genuine psychological phenomenon. And I describe it really as the first time in one's life where you are really thinking about what it is that you want from your life and from your career. And although I don't think that that's particularly unique to this generation, it's always been difficult in the first decade of your life to work out what on earth you want to do with it. But there are certain pressures nowadays that are making those kinds of decisions so difficult. Two things come to mind that make it particularly difficult nowadays. And one is just the paralysis of options. There are so many things that we can do with our lives and careers that it becomes almost impossible to navigate them. And the second thing is we are the comparison generation. So constantly comparing ourselves to others and comparing ourselves to a standard of perfection that doesn't really even exist. And those two things combined together, so the need to get it perfect and this option paralysis, it creates this real crisis in helping in people understanding what they want to do and what they want out of their lives. And it comes up in many contexts, whether that's relationships or careers or where you're living. But that's the kind of general overview of how I describe that quarter life crisis.
That's fascinating. So we're going to talk about your journey, but I'd love to go a little bit deeper into just what you were sharing there and to get your viewpoint to understand your world a little bit more. This comparison crisis that people of your generation are dealing with, where do you think that's coming from? What's behind that?
Yeah. I really don't like blaming absolutely everything on social media because I think it's it's the go-to response. But I have to say, I do think it has a huge impact on the way that we can compare ourselves to other people. So growing up with things like Instagram and Facebook, it's a platform for comparison. So we are constantly looking at other people's lives, and obviously the things that we see online, it's a skew of what's actually happening in reality. Everybody is posting this kind of positive distortion, and so there's that, and there's the kind of constant comparison with our peers. But also we can so easily see, 18-year-old billionaires and supermodels. So we think that is success. So the bar for success is so unbelievably high. And I think that as human beings, we're preconditioned to compare ourselves anyway. It's an evolutionary trait that we have developed. At one point it helped us keep up with the tribe. And so it's a bit like our addiction to sugar. It's something that we naturally do. So when you chuck social media into the mix, we literally can't help ourselves. It's like that, when you're checking out at a store and you've got all of those chocolate bars and they put them right in front of you because they know that we can't help it. It's kind of exactly the same thing.
Yeah, got you. So it's almost amplifying a weakness in some respects and having to deal with that. Yeah. Let's come back to your own story. You discovered coaching at a relatively young age. I'm fascinated to know how you discovered coaching, but also how it's shaped you and what it is that you do. It's clearly had some influence on your direction. So I'd love to learn more about that and that journey in terms of your relationship with coaching. Definitely.
I mean, I am just eternally grateful that I was able to experience coaching at such a young age. So sort of take us back to the beginning. So I first came across coaching at the end of university. So I must have been about 20. And I was really struggling with what it was that I wanted to do with my career, which impacted my well-being. And I was put in touch with an incredible coach called Roger Evans, who's remained a mentor and a friend to me throughout. And I just had one session. It was a 2-hour session. I remember it so clearly, sitting in his garden. And it was just the first time anybody had actually asked me what it was that I wanted to achieve, what it was that was important to me. And he was kind of this wizard that seemed to know more about me than I knew about myself. And I left that experience and had this kind of resounding thought of, wouldn't it be amazing if other young adults had access to a conversation like that at the beginning of their careers, when our minds are still so malleable and changing, rather than wait till the middle of our careers or the end of our careers to work out what it is that we actually want to do and to understand ourselves in a more meaningful way.
Got you. Yeah, I love this idea. I've got this image now of a wizard coaching.
Yeah, he's great.
I mean, one of the things I've learned through my own coaching experience is that actually, not necessarily that we're trying to fix problems, but essentially trying to develop new habits or beliefs. And wouldn't it be great if we could do that at an earlier age rather than later on in life, where these habits and beliefs are so heavily ingrained? Was there a particular turning point for you through your experience being coached where you suddenly realized that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Well, naturally, I had that coaching session and then completely forgot about it. And although I'd had that realization, I think I was finishing university, I traveled, I kind of fell into a job that wasn't quite right for me. But always at the back of my mind was this idea, bringing coaching to young people. And I've never been a particularly entrepreneurial person. I wasn't the sort of person that traded sweets in the playground. So the idea of starting my own business was incredibly foreign. But I think it was when I started working and got a job at an organization, and I just had a moment of, do you know what? This is not what I want. And I think it was seeing what I didn't want, which is what helped make me realize what I do want. It's actually, doing a lot of career coaching is one of the best ways to help people work out what they really want to do. So I think it was that was the impetus. And I sort of took the plunge to leave that, move back home and start the coaching journey.
Making a difference is clearly important to you. How do you feel you are making a difference with the coaching work that you're doing? I mean, you've got quite a unique sector that you work in there. Do you get any sense of the ripple effect in terms of the work that you do?
Yeah. I think for all coachees, the gift that you're giving, and all coaches, the gift that you're giving to people is the gift of self-awareness. It's the gift of understanding the way that you work and understanding your personality, and therefore giving you the choice to act in a way that's more aligned with your values. So I think that's absolutely central to the difference that any coach is making, and I hope that I'm making too, that creating a generation that has choices and doesn't just default to their kind of autopilot way of working. And so that creates a community or a culture of very self-empowered people and self-responsible people. So I think that's the kind of gift for the individual. I think for the organization, so I go into organizations and help them sort of transform their culture for the under 30s. I think for the organization, it's almost like you're fostering a culture of entrepreneurs, like people with entrepreneurial mindsets. And what I mean by that is people who are self-responsible and self-agent and resourceful, because those are the things that I feel like coaching really, really gives you. And so it often takes the onus of making change in an organization. It takes the onus off the organization, and the employees start taking charge. So it creates this much more tight-knit community. But it's both those things, that kind of like feeling of self-awareness and the gift of choice. It does ripple out into the organization as well.
I guess for many of your clients and those that you work with, I guess confidence is a big factor. Would you say that's true?
100%. 100%. In fact, I think everything, no matter, and I'm sure a lot of coaches will resonate with this, no matter what somebody comes to you with, it seems to all boil back down to confidence. And that is especially the case for those under the age of 30. And for the kind of reasons I mentioned at the beginning of comparison and trying to get things perfect, which both things kind of chip away your confidence. It's something that is really, really affecting the younger generations at the moment.
Yeah. So with that in mind, then, what about your own confidence in terms of you've obviously successfully grown Quarter Life to where it is today? I can't imagine that was an easy journey, perhaps. What's the reality of growing that business been like for you? And, what have you found that's worked? What hasn't worked for you? And what's it like to create and navigate a business in this day and age?
Yeah. Well, I think in relation to confidence, I think one of the key things that I've learned about confidence is that it's not something that I always think that there's people that are just confident and other people aren't. And it's something that you never really 100% feel confident. And I think as soon as you let go of this need for absolute confidence, that's actually when you start to be confident. So you kind of make room for the fear rather than trying to aim for this sort of perfect level of confidence. And so sort of reality of growing my own business and what's worked and what hasn't. Before I started this podcast, I had a look back over the last sort of 3 to 5 years of running my business, and actually the phases that I went through. For me, what's worked is I really threw so much at the wall to see what stuck. And I started when I first began. I started by just not doing a lot and expecting it all to just happen. I got my coaching qualifications and was like, right, okay, where are my clients? Expecting them to just be there, and obviously, as we all know, that just doesn't work. And then I just started to coach people around me using websites like Life Coach Directory, all that kind of thing. But what I realized going back over my sort of diary for the last few years is that the thing that has maintained things that has stayed the same of like a regular practice has been around meeting people. And constantly, even if it means stepping out of the comfort zone, is constantly going out and meeting people. If you do a course, going and having a conversation with the course leaders. And especially at the beginning of my business, I was fostering those relationships and connections with people that even now are starting to pay off. So I think that has been one of the things, having looked back, that has really, really impacted the growth of Quarter Life.
For you, it's very much been around developing those relationships early and often.
Yeah, definitely. One practice that I have tried to keep up is actually I keep Fridays completely free of work with Quarter Life and just dedicated to meeting new people. And I think I was really lucky at the beginning because I met some amazing people and who became mentors. And that was another thing that I advocate all the time, is trying to find mentors, people in the industry doing similar things, people that you're inspired by. And those people from even my first coach had stayed with me throughout.
Thinking about those early days with Quarter Life, where did those first few clients come from for you? What were the breakthroughs that you had that really got things going and gave you that confidence to know that this is what you wanted to pursue?
Yeah. So I think I first started like so many other people did, coaching people on the cohort of courses that you've attended, using websites like the directory websites and things like that. And then I tried to start doing a lot of talks talks, partnering with universities, partnering with schools. I went around all of my old schools, really using my own network. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget when they're starting their own coaching businesses, is that everybody comes from a network. So if you've been working for, 10 years in marketing, you will have met so many people in that industry, and we forget to actually use what we have. The real turning point for me was because I tried so many different styles of marketing, was when I turned to looking into PR using the power of the media. And I spent, months and months learning how to craft press releases and emails to journalists who were writing in the particular area that I was working in. And I finally had a few breakthroughs of being mentioned in a couple of great articles. And that for me was a real turning point in terms of people being able to find me, my website ranking better on Google. And that was a strategy that really, really worked for me. That, alongside the kind of constantly meeting people and forming those relationships, those two things, that was the sudden momentum that I needed in order for things to really start to pick up.
That's really great. So this is almost sharing your knowledge, sharing your experience out there in the world. In a way, I suppose, where your audience already is, because I know that's a really important thing to do, is to figure out where your audience is and then cross paths with them there.
Exactly.
Conversely, what are some of the things that, when you look back, didn't quite work out for you? What hasn't worked? You mentioned marketing there, and I know a lot of coaches struggle with marketing, either the right marketing or the wrong sort of marketing. What's your experience been like around that?
Do you know what? I think the thing that didn't work was taking too much advice. At the beginning, I think because I was younger, I assumed that I didn't know anything, and I assumed that everybody else had the answers, which is sort of ironic considering that we're coaches. And I think I went round and I tried to use everybody else's strategies. I did all sorts of I'm sure anyone with LinkedIn gets reached out to a million times a day by people saying they can grow your business to 6 figures and all that kind of thing. And I tried all of these different tactics and nothing stuck. And I think it was because I wasn't being authentic to actually the kind of marketing that really would have worked for me. So I think what didn't work was taking on too much advice from other people and being quite traditional in my approaches to marketing. I think it was only when I actually started to be a little bit more creative and entrepreneurial about how coaching can fit into the world that actually things started to change. So going and forming partnerships with universities, which everybody thought would be impossible, actually really ended up working for me, and forming partnerships with different organizations. I worked for a startup for a little bit, and just being a lot more creative and actually breaking the rules of marketing. It was the thing that really sort of started to help me.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Tell me more about those partnerships. That sounds really interesting in terms of how you've been able to establish and evolve those. How do they work?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of associate work. So at the beginning, I would sign up with a few coaches whose practices were growing. And it was a really great way for me to get better at coaching. Did some work within organizations. I used to deliver some workshops for a great startup, which was all about bringing better career education for kids from disadvantaged areas. I started to partner with some hospitals, so working with kids who have eating disorders, going and doing workshops and doing one-to-one coaching. I started to partner with a few different universities based in London that would send me clients, or I would again go in and do some training with them, and all sorts of things like that. And then that kind of all evolved. And one of the things that came out of especially the work with a startup is that I was accepted onto an accelerator program. And an accelerator program is basically something that helps small businesses grow and scale. And that was something that really took my business on a completely different trajectory, away from one-to-one coaching and into coaching within organizations and a whole different business model.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So again, it comes back to relationships there and evolving those relationships, and also getting support from others. And what I really liked about your response there and what you said is that actually there are so many people that have got their own ideas and perhaps advice or guidance, and as well intended as it may be, you have to kind of find your own blend, your own mix, your own approach. And it can be worth trying things out, even when people say, well, that might not work out. it's almost worth exploring, is what I was hearing there.
Absolutely. And one of I think when we start as coaches, one thing that I really faced was a lot of incredulous stares. A lot of people who didn't really get it, couldn't understand why somebody in their 20s could even become a coach. And it's actually something that my brother said to me when I was just starting out. And he said that when you have a dream or an idea, at the beginning, it's so fragile. And one comment can completely derail your plans or make you doubt yourself or actually make you abandon what it is that you want to do. So although I advocate meeting people and getting mentorship, sometimes that advice and those comments can damage the fragility of that idea that you have at the beginning. So it's really important to also really back yourself and be incredibly persistent. And I know that seems cliche to say, but especially at the beginning when it feels all quite vulnerable.
Yeah. How do you maintain that persistence that you have for what it is that you do? What's your secret there, Chloë?
I would say boundaries is something that I find incredibly important. Well, I think the first thing is doing something that you actually believe in, and the second thing is boundaries. So I went through not understanding what I wanted to do as a career, and I went through challenges with my well-being in my 20s, and that story of then being coached and coming to a bit of a turning point, it's always relevant to me. And so when I have clients come to me with any issues, whether it's careers or well-being related, I'm really there with them, and it's something that I just sort of deeply believe in, and through my own coaching and through my own values, it's something that's incredibly aligned with what I want to do. So that's the first thing. I think that in terms of persistent, like having boundaries, because at the beginning it's very tempting as a coach to be like, oh, you live in Australia, sure, I'll get up at 5 a.m. And coach you. Even if what you're doing is something that you love more than anything else, if you don't have those boundaries, you will burn yourself out, which is something that I'm sure we've all experienced. So I think that's been something that's been really important. So I do that kind of like taking Fridays off and just for meeting people, and I don't start before 10. I don't have any calls before 10 a.m. and all these kind of like small things that actually make a huge difference.
Yeah, some good guidance there. And what I was hearing there is about developing some good habits and boundaries in terms of looking after yourself first so that you can show up as the best version of yourself, without that sounding like a cliche, as the best version of yourself to those that you are serving. It's really interesting just hearing how you've managed to evolve yourself and your business to this point. With regards to where you're at today, what are some of the bigger challenges that you face taking Quarter Life and your own coaching game to the next level?
I think it's probably just challenges with yourself. When I finished the accelerator program, I was surrounded by female founders. My original idea was to make Quarter Life into a tech platform, bring coaching online and deliver it at scale to businesses. But at the end of that coaching and the end of that accelerator, I realized that actually looking at all the amazing women around me doing these incredible things who were going for investment, and I actually through mentoring realized that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I didn't want to scale it to this enormous, these enormous heights. I was really happy with where I was. And that was one of the most challenging realizations for me, because we're surrounded by a definition of what success is, and that we need to constantly grow and we need to constantly scale and move our businesses to this bigger stage, corporate coaching and all this kind of thing. And the biggest challenge for me was actually being authentic and true to myself about what I actually wanted from my business. And it was incredibly difficult, and it still is incredibly difficult to keep being authentic. And I have to, because this is what I speak to my clients about every single day, which is about doing something that is aligned with who you are. And so I think that it's actually less about the challenges of growth, but more the challenges of finding balance that I kind of come into contact with.
That's really refreshing to hear. And I like what you're saying there. I think sometimes it would be easy to lose our own vision and follow somebody else's vision of what we feel success might be. And there is a lot of talk these days around scaling and growing. And indeed, this series is about boosting your coaching business. But I think we have to think mindfully about what we mean by that for our own individual needs and what we want from life and coaching ourselves. So that's really, really insightful and really interesting to hear that from you, Chloë, as somebody who I know challenges the norm in a really healthy way. What else would you say that helps you and Quarter Life to stand out in terms of that? Because I know that you tend to take your own approach towards both coaching, marketing and business, what I was hearing there. Is there anything else that you see that you do differently, perhaps to others, that you feel is contributing to your success and the success that you've had so far?
Yeah, I think it's understanding that the fundamental principles behind coaching can be universally applied. So the idea of unconditional positive regard, active listening, holding space for people, these are not just ways of doing, but they are ways of being. And when you look at kind of the principles behind coaching, you realize that you can apply it in almost any situation. I can't think of a single part of our society that couldn't benefit from some of the qualities that coaches are trained in. And so I think one question that I asked myself was, where could this fit? Where could we take these different qualities? So I think when you step out of the box of it all needs to be one-to-one coaching, it all needs to be one-to-one or training, it opens up a wealth of different possibilities. So what I do with organizations now is I go in and it's basically exactly like coaching an individual, but an organization as a whole. So I'll go in and help them diagnose what the challenges that they're facing, specifically around their under 30s, by speaking to everybody, hearing people, speaking to the leaders of the business, and reflecting all of that back to them in a very non-judgmental way, so that not only I can bring in coaches and training, but also they can make the changes as well. So you can see it's kind of taking the principles of what coaching is and just applying it in a very different way.
Yeah, again, it's really interesting to hear your own perspective on that and how you're taking something that most of us listening to this would understand, but actually thinking of new ways that these principles could be applied and looking for those opportunities, I suppose, because it's quite easy to sort of fall into a bit of a rut in terms of how you could use certain approaches and get into some kind of default way of using them rather than actually thinking outside the box a little bit, thinking a little bit more creatively about, actually, here's a new situation. Could I cross-pollinate almost an idea from over here and try that over here and see what sort of results that I get? That's what I was hearing.
Definitely. And it's so exciting. It's so exciting because it is, and we're hearing a lot more. If you look into any sort of discussion about culture change, and especially now with everybody going back to work, there's a lot of discussions about how businesses and organizations are going to thrive culturally. And all of the things that they talk about, all of the words, as a coach, you read it and it's like, oh, that's coaching. And you notice all of these qualities. So this kind of coaching culture and coaching qualities it's really present at the moment. And so I think it's a really incredible time to be a coach.
You remind me there actually of like the closer relationship that I often see and others I notice spot this too, between leadership and coaching. And I guess that some of the stuff that you were talking about earlier in terms of building that confidence with younger folk is actually about developing their own personal leadership, I suppose. Is that what you see? Do you see a close relationship between those sorts of things?
Yeah, it's self-leadership. And as I mentioned, it's one of the things that I've noticed going into organizations and working with under 30s is that there is often a culture of expectation. So you get a lot of under 30s being like, why I expect my company to do X, Y, and Z for me. And so they wait for it to be done before trying to do it themselves. And through coaching, one of the things that we try to develop is self-leadership. I always talk about asking yourself first, asking your own advice first, and relying on yourself. And it just creates a far more balanced and equal environment to exist in.
Yeah, I love that. And you remind me there that often we do have the right answers for ourselves inside, and it's about trusting that. Yeah, it's been fascinating to talk with you today, Chloë. I've got a few questions I'd love to ask you just before we wrap up, if I may.
Sure.
One of the questions I'd love to ask you is, what's perhaps been your proudest moment so far with Quarter Life and the work that you do?
Wow, that's such a good question. Do you know what? There's something that flashed into my mind, and I don't know why, but it's there, so I'll share it. So one part of the work that I do is with an incredible organisation called Urban Scholars, and Urban Scholars it's in partnership with Brunel University, and they are all about helping young adults from low-income backgrounds into young adults sort of between the ages of 16 and 18 into higher education, to try and close the gap of opportunity that exists. And I do a lot of work with them. And there was two moments that really stand out. One was when I started to do some well-being workshops for them and teaching them all about meditation and mindset. And I just had a moment in one of those workshops where I was like, gosh, this is how incredible is it that I'm able to do this as a job. And I think another really proud moment was, again, in connection with that organization, was connecting them with an old client of mine who was from a law firm, and that law firm ended up funding the Urban Scholars program, and it was creating those connections that was and again, that ripple effect. And it was nothing, and it was just, from the goodwill of the people that I'd worked with that made that happen. And it was just, I just really went to bed with a real smile on my face that day.
Yeah, what a wonderful opportunity. It feels so gratifying, doesn't it, to be doing work and think, well, if I wasn't doing this in this way at this time, I wouldn't have been able to make those connections. And to see the results of those connections must be tremendously fulfilling for you.
Massively.
Yeah, that's great. So with all of that in mind, I mean, it's been great to learn a little bit more about your journey and about Quarterlife today. What's next for you?
Well, I think sort of going back to that sort of balance question, I think in general, I'll do more with organizations. I love the work that I've done and the companies that I've been working with so far. It's been incredibly satisfying to bring other coaches who were my trainers and my coaches into the Quarterlife team has been just fantastic. And I suppose actually that's another sort of proud moment. So I think I will be doing more of that, but also, again, striving not for external definitions of success, but more for my own balance. I'm moving to Barcelona in July to really try and do remote working properly in the way that it should be done. And I'm doing that because as an external audience, they might think, I get a lot of people saying, oh gosh, why are you doing that? Being in London is where your business is. But I'm really trying to kind of strive for what it is that is aligned with who I am and yeah, that balance.
Any particular reason Barcelona?
Well, I just think it's objectively one of the best cities in Europe. It's just fantastic. Next to the sea, I think it's the way of life there. It's got a bit of culture. I've got a sort of a small community of friends that live there, and I just think it's and just the sunshine. To be quite honest, the sunshine.
Barcelona is one of those places I've always wanted to go to. So there's a mild amount of envy there in a good way. So that's brilliant. From everything you've learned so far, Chloë, what would you say to our listener listening to you speak today? They might be starting out or growing their own coaching business. What's the one piece of advice you'd like to pass on to them?
Can I do more than one? Can I say more than one thing?
Of course you can.
Just to echo what I said before about not listening to too much advice, being open to advice, but also following your own compass as well. Building your network is always one of the most powerful things that you can do. Speaking to people who are doing similar things already and just hearing other strategies, and also just daring to think creatively about your business. There isn't just one way to do things. There are so many different opportunities of ways to use coaching in the world. So yeah, those would be my three things.
I love that. It's about taking the right sorts of risks, but also, daring to be different and being confident with that. Also following your own compass as well. Yeah. So what's true for you. Yeah. So finally, where can our listener best connect with you and find out more about you and, of course, the work that you do with Quarterlife?
So either just through my website, it's just www.quarter-life.co.uk, or just ping me an email. I'm sure they'll put my email out, but it's chloe@quarter-life.co.uk, or just connect with me on LinkedIn. It'd be really great to hear from you. My name's Chloë Garland, and I'd love to hear other people's stories and how their businesses are going and any challenges or questions they might have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chloë.
Thank you.